Okay, yeah, so I'm here with Dr. Rich Formica. He's a professor of nephrology and transplant medicine at Yale University in the United States. He's also coming off his presidency of the National Organ Transplant System in this country. So that's the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network. And so I'm here to talk with him today about a paper that he just authored in the Transplantation Journal about the value of the people who are managing and directing the OPTN. So do you want to talk a little bit about your role with the OPTN and kind of what this means?
Yeah, so I think it's important to say that the OPTN is made entirely of volunteers. It has for its entirety of its 40-year existence. Those volunteers come forward from all corners of the transplant ecosystem, so physicians, surgeons, coordinators, social workers, and most importantly, patients, donors, and donor families. So it's a pretty unique organization. And those donors contribute a lot of time. And I'll say that the paper that you referred to is actually authored by a group of us, and I'm just a participant. It's not my paper. But we sought to quantify how many hours these individuals contribute every year. And it came up to something, even after 20 years in the OPTN, I never imagined it was so much time, so much time. So it's about 400, during the calendar year of 2023 to 24, there was 459 individual volunteers filling 599 roles, right? So that means many people, about 100 people are doing more than one job. And they totaled up to over 42,000 hours. And that was a relatively conservative estimate. We sort of based on times in meetings and a finite amount of prep time for meetings. So it's probably over that number. And then we quantified the financial contribution to that by, most of these people are high functioning professionals. So, sort of calculating their hourly wage and basing it off the highest hourly wage for a federal employee, which is probably not what these individuals are actually making. And they came up to somewhere $4.5 million per year, which is notable because until recently, the entire federal contribution to the running the transplant system was only $6.5 million. So I thought that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, and so that's important to kind of remember that the value of the people that are spending their time, energy to kind of make a system work. Really, they're highly valuable people, and it's expertise, right?
Well, I think it also counters some significant misinformation there about the board being conflicted or members of the OPTN having conflicts. I mean, these are people who are volunteering their time, but it's more than volunteering their time. That's time that they're not having at work. It's time taken away from other potentially gainful employment opportunities, time away from their family, and frankly, it costs you money to participate in the OPTN, right? Because travel is not fully compensated. I was surprised during my presidency how many of the board members were using vacation time to travel for the board.
Yeah.
Right, so that's time they could have spent with their families, but they're traveling for the board, right? So, so it's pretty unique, and it's a pretty special thing.
If you could see any more research in this area, what would you like to see done?
In the area of volunteerism, or well, I think what would be really valuable would be somehow correlate that volunteer effort, not just to policies that are put out, but to transplants happening, life-saving, fewer deaths on the waiting list. Because I think that's probably the story that doesn't get told as much. Not sure how you do that, but that would be something that would be very valuable. I also think I think the government should really have a better appreciation of what they're getting for free. There's always this discussion of, as the OPTN, we couldn't accept in-kind contributions, like people wanting to donate, organizations wanting to donate their time to help us run the OPTN for some federal contracting rules, which I'm sure are in place for the right reasons. That's not allowable. And yet the volunteers are contributing this huge in-kind contribution to the federal government every year, right? And that's never been discussed. So I think we should get a little more foundational information around that.
That's fantastic information. So can you tell me a little bit about your OPTN presidency and some of your biggest challenges?
Well, so it was a unique year. As you know, you were there with us. So it was a challenging year because it was a year of transition. So we went from having one contractor, which is the way it was specified in the federal registration, and one contractor. There may be some criticisms of that approach, but it certainly made that ability to have a very fluid and dynamic environment, right? There was easy flow of communication back and forth. And the moment you split off the board from the rest of the OPTN and have separate contractors, it made information flow more difficult. We hired ourselves an executive director, and that person basically was thrown into the mix and had to sort of figure things out on the fly and sort of be that glue that went back and forth. But the environment created, even put limitations on what they could do to help facilitate that information flow back and forth. There was a lot of, in a normal year, there was some very significant events that happened that frankly needed the attention of the OPTN. They were very significant events. So trying to manage those events in addition to trying to manage the transition was a challenge. But I think the board in general rose to that occasion. And frankly, the volunteers actually really put up a lot more time in that environment. So I thought that was very rewarding to see.
And so we're here at the 2025 World Transplant Congress, and we hear a lot about other countries and how they run their transplant systems. And we often hear kind of that the United States is one of the best in the world. How does that feel being here representing some of that?
Well, I mean, I think every country has a system that works for them. So I don't think calling one the best is appropriate, right? Because what works in one country may not work in another country. But I was engaged in a conversation earlier this morning about, if you look in Canada, for example, Canada is a large geographic country. Population is smaller, of course, than the United States. But they run their transplant system based on their provinces, and each province has a slightly different, approach. And I think that's probably true of most countries, the way they run their system. And I think what we've lost track of in the United States is how unique we are. We have a nationalized system that covers 350 million people over a large geographic space. And although there's certainly things that can be improved, I think, by and large, once you're on a transplant list, and I'm not talking about access to a transplant list because that's a whole different discussion of disparity, but once you're on the transplant list, it is remarkable that how equitable it actually is. And people will look at the example of Steve Jobs and they'll say, oh, see how inequitable it is? He was able to fly to Tennessee to get a transplant. Well, the reality is he flew to Tennessee because his money couldn't buy him a transplant in Palo Alto because the system didn't allow that, right? So I think people lose a little bit of track of that.
And what is one thing you would tell the next generation of leaders that are coming into our space that may be looking in and seeing some challenges? What advice would you give them?
Well, you started that one way, which I'm going to take it one way, and then I'll give advice the second one. But I tell them to wake up and realize what the people that came before them built for them. And by that, I don't mean me. I mean the people that came before me. And we have a particularly unique system in this country that is run by professionals in the transplant community, and we have to take care of that. And if we don't take it seriously, it's going to be taken from us. And I think it's time to double down on that. And so my advice, particularly that I've been advising the new board members, is you need to remember your role, right? The OPTN's role, as specified in NOTA and the final rule, is policy development, policy oversight, oversight of transplant programs, et cetera. And the government's role is just oversight to the extent that we comply with NOTA and the final rule and governmental contracting. The government is not involved in the allocation of organs, nor should it be involved in the allocation of organs. NOTA was set up specifically to avoid that scenario. And I think we need to take that seriously and double down going into this time. And perhaps this change in chaos will actually be something good, because maybe it's going to make people realize what we have, and we're going to stop bickering over little things and stick to the bigger picture.